Hi folks, Florida Man here, bringing you an after-action report on a live diplomacy game I played over Discord and on playdiplomacy.com. I played with several people from the London Diplomacy Club, so shout out to them. Because we were using Discord, we were able to play from all over the world. I was not in London. Unfortunately, we did not get the 7 players we were planning on because one person cancelled at the last minute, so we had to decide whether to do a short-handed game or a 5-person game. We ended up playing a game on the Ancient Med variant map, a 5-person variant that takes place in the BC era. The 5 countries on that map are Carthage, Greece, Egypt, Persia, and Rome. I played as Rome. We each began the game negotiating with our neighbors so that we could each gain 3 builds without fighting anyone. My understanding is that's a fairly normal way to do things in Ancient Med. No one wants to fight in 400 BC, the first game year, when they can get 3 centers without alienating anyone. So I negotiate with Greece, and we agree that I will take Vindobona and he will take Dalmatia, splitting the 2 neutral centers between us equally. I speak with Carthage, and we agree that Carthage will take Sardinia and I will take Sicilia and Massilia. I think this is a pretty natural split when Carthage and Rome aren't going to fight each other early on. In a different case, the Roman player might try to take both Sicilia and keep Carthage out of Sardinia, but given that I have 2 armies and only 1 fleet to start with, that just doesn't seem practical to me. As the orders process for spring 400 BC, we see that I'm moving toward the centers I discussed with Greece and Carthage, and they're doing exactly the same routine as me. I chose to go directly to Sicilia rather than moving through the Tyrrhenian Sea, because unless I'm attacking someone, I try to refrain from moving my units close to centers that they own or have made clear they want to own, unless it's really necessary. Thinking more long-term, I have proposed an alliance with Greece and Egypt, and they both agree to it. I found this to be the most practical way of making sure Greece would not be thinking of attacking me early on, as well as a good potential option for eliminating 2 of the powers. Since Ancient Med has 5 powers, it frequently develops into a 3-power versus 2-power game, until the point where someone betrays their alliance. So one safe way to get through the game is to arrange a genuine 3-power alliance, and that was my initial plan. Later in the season, though, Carthage suggests a sort of Western juggernaut early, and I found that more alluring as a practical option for becoming a superpower than the less reliable-sounding triple alliance I had proposed with Greece and Egypt. Especially because I had the thought that the 3-way alliance I had proposed had about a 50-50 chance of each of Egypt and I soloing in the end, forgetting the likelihood of Greece soloing, whereas allying with Carthage felt as if it offered a stronger chance of me coming out on top, since I could always turn on Carthage as soon as Greece started to collapse, whereas I didn't foresee Egypt leaving openings for Carthage to quickly defeat him. In the fall, you see things go as normal, everyone getting the centers they expected to. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. No one decided to charge at me, which is exactly what I should expect in a game with players of this caliber. But people in diplomacy can be incredibly unpredictable. Builds are pretty straightforward. I get 2 fleets and an army, because on the Ancient Med map, fleets are generally more valuable than armies regardless of who you want to fight. I let Carthage know what to expect, and he didn't really object to it because we worked out what we were going to do with our respective fleets. I should have been more particular about what Carthage was doing with his units in retrospect. If Carthage was going after Egypt, he really should have built 2 armies and 1 fleet, rather than the reverse. Unfortunately for me, as soon as spring 399 BC processes, I see that Carthage, almost immediately after agreeing to work together, has stabbed me. Fortunately for me, Egypt followed up on the proposed alliance from earlier by attacking Carthage at the same time. So, Carthage immediately tries to make up with me, offering to only take a single center, Massilia, off of me, and then focus entirely on Egypt. From my perspective, though, offering to only take 1 center off of me is not the proposal of a person who wants to be an ally, especially when Carthage had the ability to get an uncontested center and additional build without taking anything from me. So even while I verbally accept Carthage's proposal, I plan on immediately attacking Carthage. At the same time, having moved my troops against Greece, I propose that I will only take 1 center off of him, and I will focus everything against Carthage after that. I think what persuaded him might have been my argument that if he and Carthage joined forces against me, Carthage would be the primary beneficiary. In fall 399 BC, we therefore see my army in Venetia move into Dalmatia, while my fleets move to surround the Carthaginian island of Sardinia. Fortunately for me, Greece is not as vengeful as I am, so he actually followed through with moving his units east against Persia. He's going to continue moving in this direction despite the fact that I made an attempt this season to take Athens as well. In the build phase, Greece destroys the Dalmatian army at my request, while Carthage builds fleets despite the fact that Egypt is still attacking him. Egypt builds an army, so the plan to pile on Carthage is still on. Carthage speaks with me at this point though, and he says that it's okay if I take Sardinia as long as I let him focus on Egypt after that. He offers to convoy the Massilia army away from my borders, which will enable me to freely go after Greece and enable Carthage to defend himself from Egypt. I agree to this proposal, and in spring 398 BC we see I move into Sardinia and shift my armies away from Carthage again, and Carthage positions his fleet in the Balearis to perform the convoy. At this point, I'm taking a big risk. My move away from Carthage could allow him to follow through and backstab me very easily as he had been trying to do earlier. And if he made peace with Egypt at the same time, my forces would probably be entirely destroyed by a two-sided attack from Carthage and Greece, who would probably be both fed up with my lies and very capable of achieving some measure of vengeance. In fall, you see Carthage follows through with his convoy, and at the same time, Egypt is making advances overland into Western Africa. Most importantly for me, I outguess Greece, and he loses Macedonia and Sparta to me, while losing Miletus to Persia, reducing Greece to 2 centers. The result of this phenomenal season for me is that I get 3 builds, and I construct 2 fleets and an army. Per prior agreement, Carthage destroys his fleet in the Ligurian Sea, which was bordering my capital of Roma and therefore threatened me by its existence. I should note, Carthage expresses that he's pretty concerned about the Persian-Egyptian alliance around this point, and I think he was concerned about it at an earlier point too. It's pretty clear, looking at the moves, that Persia and Egypt have had a very cozy relationship throughout this game, despite my initially thinking that Egypt and Persia should fight, along with Egypt fighting Carthage, me fighting Carthage, and Greece fighting Persia, as an element of the 3-power alliance I had tried to arrange between myself, Greece, and Egypt. The fact of Persia and Egypt being so close binds Carthage more closely to me, and I begin consulting in detail with him about orders at around this time, although I believe it may have started slightly earlier. In the spring of 397 BC, I achieve what may have been my great diplomatic feat of the game. I recruit Greece, who I have almost single-handedly destroyed, as an ally against Persia and Egypt. I think this might boil down to the fact that nobody else was likely trying to make him an ally, but in a situation like this, where Carthage and I were almost equally matched against Persia and Egypt, Greece's 2 remaining fleets became quite important, especially considering how well positioned they were. With the processing of orders, Greece got me into the Libyan Sea, busting a hole in Egypt's defenses. In the fall, we continued working together, and we took Crete from Egypt while transferring Byzantium from Greece to me. Although I lost the Libyan Sea, this allowed me to retreat forward into Alexandria, putting me in an Egyptian home center. I take this opportunity to build an army, since we have so many fleets already working for our alliance. I tell Carthage that I'm going to send it east against Persia, but I'm already thinking about betraying Carthage, and I know it will be useful for that. In spring 396 BC, Carthage asks for permission to take Sardinia, so he can get a build as well. I give him permission to do it because I knew I couldn't defend Sardinia for long with my naval force in the region if it became the subject of a genuine dispute. At the same time, though, I moved to take Massilia and the Balearis from Carthage, because I think with just 2 units, I could fairly quickly take 3 dots off of him, and then retake Sardinia and reach the Carthaginian homeland. In fall, Carthage strikes a conciliatory note. He blames himself to a significant degree for the breakdown of our alliance because of his early betrayal. Therefore, he accepts that I'm retaking Massilia and simply asks me not to take the Balearis. I agree to this, and I don't take the Balearis. Instead, I move that fleet closer to Carthage itself. This is what gunboat diplomacy, in the historical sense, traditionally looks like, folks. Elsewhere, I decide that Greece has outlived his usefulness. I have a conversation with Persia, where I suggest that he and I are the strongest 2 powers still standing, and I offer to give him Byzantium if he'll support me into Crete, and I suggest he should stab Egypt, because the Egyptian centers will naturally go to him in the event of a 2-power draw. I suggest that that is the goal we should be working towards. He doesn't stab Egypt, but he does support me into Crete. Also, I sneak from Alexandria into Thebes, taking another Egyptian home center. The net result is that I get 3 builds because I had waived 1 earlier, and I make them all fleets. Persia also builds fleets, which makes a lot of sense because he can't possibly make much more progress with so many armies and almost no fleets, which had been his fairly conservative approach thus far, just attempting to hold on to the area around his homeland. In spring 395 BC, I take the Baleares and position to take Saguntum from Carthage. Carthage and Egypt both position to fight me. Persia fails to enter order, so I get into Byzantium without really expecting to. But it's at this point that I begin to be at war with the entire world. And for that reason I reach out to Egypt again. He expresses disappointment that I haven't followed through with our earlier proposed alliance against Carthage until very recently, and I've done more harm to Egypt than I have to Carthage. But ultimately, I ask Egypt if he's interested in finishing second in this game, and he expresses that he is. So in the fall, Egypt retakes Alexandria without any resistance from me, and he simultaneously moves the rest of his units west against Carthage again. Carthage is attacking me, but neither he nor I gain any real ground this year relative to each other. In the east, I gain Miletus from Persia. Persia stabs Egypt, to my surprise as well as Egypt's, and it's at this point that we agreed to end the game. Although the game had not yet reached its technical endpoint by this time, we had given it another year in terms of our planning, everyone was rather tired, and the other players were kind enough to concede me the victory, although I'm not quite certain I would have earned it. Carthage suggested that the game went badly for himself and Egypt due to them getting into a land war in Africa. He thought that Carthage would, in a straight one-on-one fight with Rome, naturally have an advantage and slowly grind Rome down due to superior naval strength. Carthage was surprised that Egypt and Persia had such a strong alliance, which neither of them betrayed through almost the entire game. Carthage was very successful in giving me advice throughout the game, taking tactical advice himself, and keeping himself alive. He made many trust-building moves that allowed us to work together very closely and effectively until I made the stab. Overall, I'd agree that he gave off an impression of being a reliable person through both his moves and his communication style, and he made it easy to trust him. Egypt and Persia, I think, did an excellent job of building a tight alliance together, but I would say Persia made the mistake of being too committed to land forces, which could not help him as much in this game as it does on the standard map. He couldn't use land forces alone to conquer Greece, or to overcome my forces once I had conquered Greece, and he probably would have ultimately lost a lot of his land to me, more than I had taken by the end of the game, just because of that overcommitment to land forces. Egypt did a good job of waging the war with Carthage, and he also did a good job with the diplomatic aspect of the game, but I was a little surprised he didn't try to exert more of an influence on me when he saw I was working with Carthage earlier in the game. Since this was a live game, I understand he probably felt he only had time to coordinate in detail with Persia. On the whole, I enjoyed the game a lot. That might be in significant part because of the outcome. It's rare to come out on top in a game with such strong players, but I think it's also because it's been a while since I made time for a live game, and the excitement that comes with them is pretty great. I don't know if I learned much more about Ancient Med's strategy, but I at least have a little more motivation to try this variant again in the future. I hope you liked this commentary, and if so, you know what to do. Like and subscribe. It's also helpful to comment below. That feeds the algorithm. I'd like to pass 500 subscribers by the end of March, so anything that helps push us toward that goal is appreciated. And I will offer a special thanks to the people named in the credits here, who are responsible for any and all subtitles that might be featured on this and other videos on my channel. We're taking Florida Man Diplomacy international, folks, and 2021 looks bright. Until next time, Florida Man, out.